I like building stuff. I'm a tinkerer. I'm a builder. I love it when somebody says, "Oh, it would be cool if," but probably you can't do it. That's my favorite. Like,
challenge accepted.
Oh man, yeah, that's like give
Like
me
that chip covered in salt. I was like, oh, you're not going to eat that now.
Yeah.
Down the hatchet went.
I got a problem with that.
I'm not going to introduce you to the person that you're asking for because your product that you created is going to replace me. Have you had any conversations like that, and how do you overcome it? Then what's next?
Then you make them a mafia offer.
What's the mafia offer?
A mafia, something so good they can't refuse.
Welcome to Hello Grow,
The #1 growth podcast in the world.
Michael Query. We're stoked to have you, bro.
Thanks. Me too.
Super, super pumped. Quick background on Mike Query. Graduated from the University of Utah as an engineer and then went on to get his master's in engineering. Somehow, we're going to talk about it in this conversation, but went from engineering to owning a marketing company, which I still can't connect those dots in my head, so we're going to connect those dots. Owns and runs a highly successful marketing company and now SaaS company where they've taken a product and have licensed it directly to marketers within companies. So pumped to have you.
Thanks, man.
On the podcast.
Glad to be here, dude.
Today we're going to talk about two things. One, how businesses can leverage marketing to grow their own businesses. And two, how we can pivot consulting companies into SaaS companies, how you can build products. So I just want to start out, connect the dots for us. How did you graduate with an engineering degree, like you're pure blood engineer, very analytical, and how'd you get into marketing?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a story. It depends how much of it you want.
We want the whole thing.
So for me, it started, I did undergraduate work in electrical engineering, and I was always interested in doing, I like the medical stuff. So that's kind of where I spent some of my elective sort of research work. And I decided what I wanted to do was I wanted to pursue a PhD, and I started that at the U. And at the beginning of that, you pick out you go ask people who has money and who's got funding, and then you ask if there's open spots on research teams, and you try and pick out an advisor and a research group to work with, and they give you the lowliest jobs to do, and you do whatever they say whenever they say it. And I picked a guy named Doug Christensen who was one of the, there's not that there's that many of them, but one of the foremost leading researchers in ultrasound. And so he was an older dude at the time, and I got on his research team and started doing some work, and we were investigating, they're called AV grafts. They're arterial venal grafts, and when you have kidney dialysis and you need to go in regularly to have your blood transfused, they have a little graft that they put in your arm that connects an artery and a vein and gets a lot of blood flow in that one area, and that's where they connect into for the dialysis. Usually they build those out of native tissue, but native tissue is sometimes hard to come by because they got to get it from someplace. So there's artificial grafts, and those artificial grafts are most often made out of Teflon, but your body treats it like a foreign body response, but it's like scar tissue. So over time, they don't last particularly long because your body grows these cells on the inside of it and slows down the blood flow. So not my idea, but somebody else's idea, and I was kind of involved in the research team that was looking at this, realized that Teflon, that it's kind of like PVC almost, but flexible PVC, that Teflon is super absorptive of ultrasonic energy. And so you can put an ultrasonic transducer or sensor on it or activator, and it'll heat that stuff up more than it will your surrounding tissue. So there was an idea that what they could do is during dialysis, you could heat up that piece of material selectively, and it'd prolong the life of the grafts. So that's what we were researching, and it was super interesting, but I got introduced. Academia is slow moving. It's very thorough, but it's super slow. And so I spent my first year or two growing cells in petri dishes, and I didn't know anything about cells or biology stuff at all, and proving that they would die when you heated them up. And I was everybody knew that they would die when you heated them up, but that was the foundational work that had to be done to prove whether this was going to be safe. And I was sitting there thinking the whole time, can't we just put one in me and then try it? It's not
you're already bred to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, totally. I don't think we need to do this part of it. Let's just put one in something. And
did you propose that?
I asked.
Here's my arm.
So yeah, I asked, and they were like, "Well, the next thing we do is we go to pigs, and then after pigs, then we can go to cows, maybe or maybe not, and then if we can prove like safety and efficacy there, then maybe we can get some humans." And I was like, "Are you, you're sure? let's go. Like next week, let's try something."
What are we 30 years later?
So that's what I was working on, and I had that disposition, and my thesis advisor knew it. Like when he worked with me, he could sense that like you don't have the patience for this. I don't think he ever said that, but he introduced me to a guy that was working in industry and was a consultant, had grown a large business, and now is consulting after exiting that business. His name's Dean Constantine. What's up, Dean? And he introduced me to Dean because Dean needed just a student lackey to go do some the work that he didn't want to do, and so we got calls working with Dean while I was at school still. We got calls all the time for people trying to do stuff and wanting to move like that fast at those speeds. Industry was like, "We want you to build a prototype. Can you be done in like a week or two?" And we're like, "Yeah, like we're gonna cut some corners." And they're like, "Great, like cut some corners. That sounds like a good plan." So I really got a taste for that and decided to stop the PhD. I had done enough research that I could kind of write a master's thesis and like get out the door. And so I did that and jumped into engineering. And I spent 5 or 6 years doing that with Dean.
So you guys are in a lab getting requests to build crazy stuff and just
like
running experiments, tests, and inventing.
Totally. And in fact, I told you guys one of these stories, but I'll tell you another one. So one of the things that a lot of times what we would get called to build as a company outside the United States would want to build something like U.S. technology because they would want to license it and sell it themselves, but wouldn't want to pay U.S. pricing. And U.S. pricing, the technology in the U.S. is expensive because of our regulations. That's what makes it super expensive. The technology production isn't as expensive as the technology prices are. So much of it has to do with all the thoroughness of all the regulation that you have to go through. So companies outside the U.S. are like, "Yeah, we'll hire 2 dudes in a basement to like try some stuff, and like, and then we'll go throw that on some people, and like we'll be fine." So
consumer products, consumer goods.
No, medical stuff.
Medical things for sure. Being built by 2 guys in the U.S. that's being licensed and paid for by an overseas company.
So one of the pieces that we built was called a phacoemulsification handpiece, and it's what they use when you have a cataract. When you replace the lens in your eye in cataract surgery, the first thing you do is cut a little slit around the side of your iris. And then you go back in and you emulsify or liquefy the lens and suck it out. And then you put in a fake lens or a prosthetic. And so the tool that they use to do that, sucking out the lens, is called a phacoemulsification handpiece. And so we built 3 or 4 different versions for companies in India and Brazil. And those are in use now. Like no FDA, just...
This is why Courtney will not let us move to Brazil because of this conversation right here.
Yeah, they work though; they're fine. But so we would build like prototypes, and then the companies that would contract with us would deal with production. But they would say, "Here's what we need it to be able to do, and go try it." So that's what we spent. I spent 5 or 6 years doing just that. Like people would call with their product idea. And usually like technical specs, they weren't like marketing people, but they'd call with tech specs and say, "We need something that can do this." We built some probes that they use to test the depth of your eye called A-scan probes. They put them on your eye and they look at them and tell how deep your cornea goes. So we built some of those that send out a little pulse of ultrasound and bounce back. And then based on the time that it takes to get out and back, they can measure the distance.
Okay, so you and Neil deGrasse Tyson's cousin,
Totally.
Dean, who's this inventor, you guys are hanging out in a basement in a lab, you're doing this, and somehow you still end up in marketing. You're just walking me down, he's an engineer, that makes sense. How did you ever get to marketing?
So after operating there for 5 or 6 years, and Dean might tell this story a little differently, but the way I felt it was that I wanted to build something kind of big and crazy. I wanted to try something. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids yet. And I wanted to try something hard. And,
because the cornea stuff and all that was out of cataract tools.
We were working for other people is what it was. Is we were on contract to build things for other people, and I wanted to build something that we'd own. And we got little bits of ownership by building pieces of tech. Like my first taste of building and selling my own software was kind of an interesting experience that I gathered there. They had an old machine called an HP 4194. It was a Hewlett Packard machine. It was like, if you can't see my hands, if you're listening, it's like maybe 2.5 feet wide by like 2 feet tall, and then like by 2 feet deep. This big giant machine that sits on a lab desk. And what it does is it's called an impedance analyzer, but it measures the electric currents and resistance and capacitance in a material or in a device. So you can kind of measure, you can test circuitry and components with it. And they were built in the 70s. Like, and HP released a new version in like the late 90s, but it was missing one of the pieces of functionality that the one in the 70s had. So people all the time kept these things around in labs, like in college labs all over the place. There's people that got these old 1970s impedance analyzers. And when I met Dean would use it. He'd set something up, he'd take a measurement on it, and he'd take a picture of it to send in a report. And the way he took a picture of it, this is like 2012 or something, he would like turn the lights off in the room. He'd put a blanket over the machine in between him and himself, and then he'd get a picture, like a camera out. He'd take a picture, and then he'd upload it into a report. And I was like, there's gotta be a better way to do this than that, right? So we built a custom connector to it, and then some software so you could plug into one of its old ports, and then you could use it to control the machine. So you could actually say like, take a measurement or schedule 5 or 10 measurements, then download me the images. And it turned out that like there were actually quite a few labs that were really interested in not doing the same thing that he was doing, which was like taking pictures of the old like cathode ray TV screen. So that was one of the first tastes that I ever got of selling software, where it was like, oh, this is awesome. Because people would call you and they'd pay you and you would do nothing.
Yeah, it's ready.
It was awesome. So I got like hungry for that. So Dean and I kind of like wrapped up that effort because I think he was ready to go, like be grandpa and spend time with family. And I wanted to put in some long hours and make something. So we kind of wrapped up that work, sold a little bit of technology to the existing companies that had paid us to develop some of their things. And that bought me a little bit of a window. And then I started deciding what was next, and tried a handful of little things, built some software that didn't sell at all. And then had a friend that was in marketing, and he was in affiliate marketing. And affiliate marketers are spending a lot of their time trying to determine which deals they ought to run and which are most profitable. And so he was like telling me about what he did and showing me how he made those decisions. And I was like, dude, like pretty sure that your Excel spreadsheet can be automated. I think we can automate your whole job. And so we started trying to do that, measuring the success of affiliate offers. And we built some things that worked. But we didn't know anything about the market. We didn't know that most of the affiliates were poor. Most of their offers weren't profitable. And there were a few that were super profitable, and those guys had enterprise tech. And what we were working on wasn't a common problem, but we didn't know. So I got my first taste of building a product that nobody cared about in that scenario, because I knew nothing about the market compared to the other scenarios. Like I was building a problem to solve a problem, a known common problem. And so we tried that and failed, but pivoted because we ultimately ended up finding out that we started working with digital marketing agencies to see if the software that we developed to find productive offers for affiliates would also work for monitoring their clients' efforts. And it did, but the agencies commonly said something to the effect of, yeah, but we don't really trust the data anyway. Interesting insight, but we don't know if we trust the data. And as naive product builders, we were like, well, why don't we just fix the data so we can see if the product works? Like that, we were focused on what mattered to us, not what mattered to the market. And we were like, can't we just like prove that our thing is useful? And so we set up data for free a few times for a few different agencies and groups and potential clients before we realized that there was actually a market opportunity to do that, to do the data engineering for marketing teams. And that was the birth of what turned into AdMind, which is our marketing analytics consulting company that we have been running for the last 8 or 9 years.
Love it.
Yeah. I like building stuff. I'm a tinkerer. I'm a builder. I love it when people at the beginning of I love it when somebody says, "Oh, it would be cool if, but probably you can't do it." That's my favorite. Like,
challenge accepted.
Oh man, yeah, that's like give
Like
me
that chip covered in salt. I was like, oh, you're not going to eat that now.
Yeah.
Down the hatch it went.
I got a problem with that.
Yeah. Tell me what I can
Yeah,
do.
for sure.
Okay, so going into marketing, what's the analysis that a business of any size should go through before they make a decision to spend money on marketing? What process?
That's a great question. So I should give you a little bit of background because I'm an engineer that does a lot of marketing. I'm not a marketer. So I've learned a lot, but there's a few different flavors of marketers too. There's some that are super creative and really great with messaging and really great with the touch and feel sort of stuff. And I've picked up a bunch of that, but that's not my intuition. My intuition is not to think like, what do people feel when they read or think this or get exposed to this idea? And how do I manipulate that to draw them closer to something that I can sell them? That's something I've picked up by being around it. I'm much more inclined to think about it mathematically and think like, if you put $1 in the beginning of this machine, how many dollars do you get out at the end, and how do you like quantify the process part of that, like the dollar in to dollars out? So you'll get some of my marketing ideas, but I wouldn't claim myself to be like the marketer. I'm not a Seth Godin. I like things. Do you guys know Seth Godin?
Yep.
Yeah. He doesn't write linearly or anything. If you read any of his books, it's like you could open to any page at any point and just start reading, and it's like, this is amazing. And you flip to the next page and you're like, this isn't even connected to what he was just saying. That's not me. I like things like linear and in order and build upon each other. And we spend a lot of time working with primarily like tech companies that do B2B marketing and e-commerce companies that are direct to consumer. And sometimes there's kind of like hybrid flavors of those things, but that's where we spend a lot of our time. And we get contracted by teams that need help in measuring, usually marketing teams of 5, 7, 10, 15. Some of them get to like hundreds of people in the marketing teams. But that means that they're engaged in a handful of efforts, and they're trying to figure out which of these, when we pull this lever and we do more email, what does that do to our retargeting? Or when we buy more search, what does that do to our organic or our paid social? So they're thinking about how to like model the different levers and keep communication aligned between a set of different people. That's where we help quite a bit. So that's my experience like professionally in marketing. And then marketing our own firm is small, and it's probably a little bit more appropriate for maybe your listeners, but because we don't do what our clients do when we market. We're not that big in our marketing efforts. So for us, because we're trying to market to other businesses, the first thing I think that matters is determining what your market says about the thing that you think is valuable. If you don't have a customer already, then you're probably not ready to market very much. You need to sell first. And once you can get a customer or two based on sales and networking, then you can start to identify what their actual needs are, and how they express their needs, because that's what you need to do in marketing. Is you need to be in the places where they're expressing their needs. So in B2B, in fact, this is something that's interesting in selling businesses to businesses. The most common place, there's kind of two flavors. There's a flavor that's like, you're a business and you're building something that's brand new that doesn't exist. And we have this sort of circumstance in our SaaS company. We're building something that doesn't exist. And as a result, that means there's not a demand for it. Nobody's saying, will you give me the thing that you're building? Because they don't know you're building it. So in that circumstance, you have to start at the marketing level that's demand generation. You have to start with education. There's another scenario that's like, and on our consulting business is like this, where there is a demand for what we do. People express a demand in places already. We have competitors. It's a known product. If you say like, I'm going to start up a car repair shop. There's people who already know what that is, and they're going to be looking for it. So your marketing job in that scenario is not demand generation. The very first most profitable thing you can do is start where people are expressing those needs.
Can you walk us through a little bit of the education? You said the marketing, when you're starting a product that's not currently in the market, you have to start with education.
Yeah.
How do you go about that tactically?
So I don't know that I'm the best person to describe this. We're working on it, and I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm not. Our SaaS company is like borderline profitable. We haven't raised, and we make close to as much as it costs us to operate. We've been operating for maybe 12 months. So
hats off to you, bro. You haven't raised and you're already a profitable SaaS company. No one can say that.
Close-ish. Well, yeah, there's different flavors of how to do this. So a lot of times there's kind of a couple different ways between comparing bootstrapping versus raising. And in the raise category, from my perspective, and you know some about this, Court, for sure, but in the raise category, it's like we have something that we think is valuable. What we need to do now is we need to go sell it and prove it. And if you're going to raise and you don't have very much, the hot word is traction, if you don't have proven customers that are paying you to use the thing that you're building, then your raising premise is going to be bad. Like you're going to not get great valuations. You have to give up a lot of equity to get any money because you don't have proven value creation at your fingertips. So the further you are along down that path, the further you are to proven value creation, then the less you need to raise or the less you need to give up when you raise. So there's a lot of companies out there that have never raised. I think one of the interesting ones, like if you listen to the How I Built This podcast, Guy Raz's stuff, they share a couple scenarios that are like that. Like Calendly, I think those guys never raised. They built something profitable from day one. And that's kind of our disposition, is we're interested in controlling our own destiny. Fortunately, we have enough to finance what we need to do now. So our hope is that we don't ever raise. But what you're doing in either of those, in the pathway raising or not raising, what you have to do is you have to discover what your potential customers' needs are. And there's a ton of thought and research that's gone into this. There's John Richards here locally in Utah runs a startup ignition group that talks about this sort of stuff. There's quite a bit of research that's gone into like what a startup looks like and how it's different from a profitable company and how you navigate that path. One of the definitions of a startup is that it's a temporary organization seeking product market fit. So it's not meant to be a permanent sort of thing. It's meant to try something else until it finds the connection between its offering and the market.
So we tell us your difference in approach. You said you built something that people didn't want your first time around with AdMind.
Totally.
So tell us what you learned from that and what you have done differently this time around.
It's all hubris. It's 100%. I think I know what people should be doing, and therefore I will build the thing that I think they should be using. That was what we did wrong the very first time, is we built something that we thought people should be using and knew nothing about what they were actually doing. We didn't know anything about what their current pains were. This time around, we spent our first month or two writing 0 lines of code and holding what we called customer validation interviews, where we would talk to people. We thought we had a sense of where there was a problem. We'd been consulting in the space for 8 or 9 years, so we knew what some of the common issues were, but we didn't know if our ideas about how to solve those common issues were acceptable to the market. So the first thing we did was a bunch of interviews with our target market. Some of those were from our consulting company's client base, and some of them were just reach out random people. And we asked them jobs to be done type questions. And that's a specific phrase that comes from Clayton Christensen's research. Mm-hmm. And the idea is, what progress are you trying to make? And then walk me through when you do that and when you have specific issues that you encounter trying to accomplish that progress. So we started by asking, when you go to use marketing data, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And then talk us through, so that then there's a couple scenarios that pop up in answers to that question. And we came up with 4 essentially. Marketing data gets used to report up to your superiors and prove why you should have budget or a job or anything, but it's reporting up to superiors. It has to do with holding your teammate and your teammates and your colleagues accountable. So like we say we're going to do X, Y, or Z, we're going to use the data to describe whether we've done that or not. That usually happens like at some sort of irregular cadence. There's answer ad hoc questions. Like somebody comes into my office as a marketer and says, hey, how many leads did we generate last month? Like I jump in to answer that question by looking at marketing data. And the last thing is like opportunity finding. So what are we currently doing? Where are there gaps in what we're currently doing that we could do more of, or that we aren't doing yet that we should be doing? And that sort of is that happened less frequently. It's usually done like on a quarterly basis as you're planning strategically. Those are kind of the 4 jobs of marketing data. We didn't know those when we started. We started asking that, saying, what are you doing? What are you trying to accomplish? And it's like, reporting to superiors. I'm trying to find opportunities. I'm trying to answer questions of people that run into my door with their hair on fire, and I'm trying to hold my team accountable. And then we say, so how do you do that? And people walk through like, well, this is what it looks like for me to prepare a quarterly like progress report for my superiors. I usually go to all these different systems. I pull this stuff. I'm putting it in PowerPoint. Like, okay, so what sucks about that? And like, oh man, it sucks that like we can't remember the filters that we set every time we go to like pull those reports again. I can't remember what I did last quarter. I have to build myself like a whole sheet of things. So you go, okay, cool. Like there's an opportunity. Maybe we do something about it. Maybe we don't. But like pulling data from different places to populate the same report and keeping those things, like that's something. There's a little thing there. People go, oh, the worst thing in the world is when somebody runs into my office with their hair on fire and says, you didn't even know that our lead form's been broken for the last 2 weeks. And I'm like, I think I'm supposed to know that. How did I not know? And so that's one of the big areas of opportunity for us, is that most marketers are looking at data reactively instead of proactively. So they get caught off guard when something breaks or changes. And in teams of 5 and 10, things are changing a lot. So keeping up to date with the changes is pretty difficult and causes some substantial pain. So point is, to answer that question, that's long-winded, but we went through customer validation where we just asked, what are you trying to do? Okay, walk me through how you do what you're trying to do, and where do you find friction? And people will tell you things like, oh, every time I go to do blank, I do this. And you go, actually, like just pause and tell me the last time that you did it, and like walk me through step by step what you did. That answer is way different than what people think they should be doing. It's better to look at what are you actually doing? Where do you actually feel friction, rather than what do you think you should be doing and where do you think you feel friction?
I love that, and I'm listening to you right here, and I wish I had this conversation with you a year ago, because we launched 2 products, 2 new services at Aspen, and I never thought about conducting customer validation interviews. Yeah. I'm very interested in so you outlined the interview, what you asked them. Yeah. I'm very interested in, before that, how do you approach potential customers? So you had a handful of customers that came from the other business that you already knew, but there were some that never talked to you before, right? Yep. So how do you approach them? Like you don't have a product, like you think you have something. How do you approach them in a way that, like, I don't want to waste these people. Like I don't have a product. First, how do you approach those people so that they will give you time to talk to them? Yeah. And what do you do if you hit a wall? Okay, this is not our customer archetype. Like there's nothing here for us. Yeah.
The answer to the first question is totally shameless. We just like LinkedIn'd them and said, we'll give you $200 to spend 25 or 30 minutes with us and answer some questions. So like promise we're not going to sell you. Like we don't have anything to sell. Interesting. We just want to talk to you about what your workflows look like. And if you can position that pretty well, most people love to complain about where they have issues. So like if you can get that empathy in your messaging, like I just want to hear, like I'm dedicated to helping people like you. That's my job. I can't even sell you if I wanted to. So can you give me 20 or 30 minutes to just walk me through some of the things that suck? Because all I want to do is make those things go away.
I love that. So you're not really talking to the business, you're talking to the employee.
100%.
And you're incentivizing them to talk to you.
They're the only ones that buy. Businesses don't buy, employees buy.
I love that.
Yeah. So that was what we did. So there's kind of a maturation process between a customer validation interview, and there's something even before that that's a customer discovery interview. So discovery is like, tell me your problems, tell me what you're trying to, like, tell me your jobs, tell me your workflows. Customer validation then is the next stage where you go, I think I have a thing to solve some of these common problems. So first I'm going to ask questions about what the problems are. And you're going to say, yeah, I have those. And then I'm going to go, okay, if the following thing existed, how valuable is that to you? And if it is valuable, is it something that you'd exchange money for today? And I can't sell it to you. I'm just asking you if it was there, would you? And that's not the best interview question, because a lot of people, what people say they would do and what they actually do are different. But it's a good start, at least. It's better than spending a year writing code and finding out that your idea doesn't actually work. So we built mocks of things, and we said, if this existed this way, would you? And people then, they would go, yes, if it existed, this is like on a scale of 0 to 10, this is a 10. I would buy it right now. Okay, cool. What concerns you have? I don't think that's possible. Like, all right, why do you not think that's possible? And that starts to build your value prop. Now it's like, okay, you don't think it's possible because you think it's going to take a lot of time to set up. You think it's going to take a lot of time to manage ongoing. You think that it would take a lot of work to coordinate with the people who are the gatekeepers to the systems that have data. And so it's like, all right, now I can start building features around the things that scare you about whether this is possible or not. So that's customer discovery, moving to customer validation. There's books on this stuff, like Deploy Empathy is a great read. Mom Test is a fantastic read about holding customer validation interviews and asking those questions and not introducing bias. Those are really, really good reads. Your second question was, so you said, how do you approach? And then,
the second
what happens
question,
if you don't find the archetype?
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know that very well, because we knew a lot about, we had pre-existing knowledge about a lot of what the archetype looked like. And so we knew the shape and the general like form of their problems, but we didn't know the specifics. So we didn't have the problem of like, hey, you probably think this is an issue. And they're like, that's not an issue at all. Like, we knew them well enough to not like totally whiff. So I don't know what if you totally whiffed, then I think it's back to the drawing board. So John Richards and Startup Ignition give the idea of what they call it a wow factor score. And they say, you ask people the question, I kind of hinted at it, but what, if this existed today, how excited does this make you? 0 to 10. And if people give you average scores of less than a 7, then it means you don't have anything that's even close. You need something that's 9s and 10s before you move forward. If it's 7s, then it means like tweak. It means you don't have your value props right yet. You don't have your solution.
I love that.
What if you have a complex solution that is only understood by a few? Can you still go through that wow factor test? It's not like you're selling a consumer product good, but like a unique solution to a few, like a subset of people.
Yeah, I think that like it's all about finding your minimum viable audience. So, I mean, I think we fit in that category that like, it's not all marketers. It's not all digital marketers. It's digital marketers in specific company ranges and specific marketing team sizes that are working in specific platforms. So we didn't know that at the beginning. You try that and you go like, hey, this guy's like a marketer at like a publisher, something. He's like, he like runs a newspaper. You go, do you have this problem? And he's like, yeah, I have that problem. And you go, is it something like, if this existed today, are you excited? And they're like, yes. And you go, how much money would you part with now to have this experience? And they're like, well, we don't have any money for that. It's like, well, okay, dang. Like, I have that in discussion like 3 times with publishers, and like, none of them can afford us building this thing. So publishers are off the list, but B2B SaaS, like those guys got cash to spend. And so I think that it's about honing and narrowing, and that kind of happens as you're interviewing, it did for us.
So after the interview and then the and then the validation, then what's next?
Then you make them a mafia offer.
What's a mafia offer?
A mafia, something so good they can't refuse. And that's how you get your first few, like for us in software, your first few beta users. Now, if you're not B2B software, if you're like trying to build a next social network, then you have this huge cold start problem that a social network is only useful when it has other people on it. So you have to get people on it, but it's not useful till you get people on it. It's like
chicken and the
egg. Yeah. So this is where you like people raise tons and tons of money on an idea and hope that in years it'll work and turn into fruition. I don't know how to do that. That seems insane and crazy to me. And it turns into Facebooks and Instagrams sometimes. But I have an investor friend who said the ocean floor is littered with the dead bodies of people who tried to build the next Facebook, Instagram, or Uber. So I don't know how to do that. Not reliably. It's not my space. So
you give a mafia proposal.
So what you'll say is something like, we will do, if you were to go buy what we're trying to build at the market in like if you were to pay your team to do this sort of a job, it might cost you $15,000 a month. We're trying to build something that can scale, but we don't know if it works. So we'll do it for you for $2,000 or $3,000 a month manually. It would cost you $15,000 at the market, but we'll do it for a few. And in hopes that we can build something that becomes a little bit more scalable with time. And on top of that, we'll give you, like first right of refusal for the production products and things like so. You build some sort of I would have to be stupid to say no to this offer, sort of an offer. You're not going to make money, but you're going to prove traction. And that's hard. That was actually our hardest phase, was like pitching that mafia offer stuff. And like acceptance rates were so low. And that tells you a lot about what you think your pricing is, what you think your value prop really, really is when it comes time to exchange money. So
how do you know if it's the pitch or if it's the price and the product?
I don't know. It's a good question. The product builder in me says that the pitch shouldn't, like a pitch can polish something 10 or 15 or 20%, but it can't change it 99% unless it's lies. So you can pitch and you can change your ideas quickly when you pitch. And that's good if you don't have something that exists. And so by changing your ideas, you're just changing the future potential. But my gut says that the pitch is polish, not substance. And so if it doesn't work, you can get a great pitcher and they can get 15 or 20% better, but not 1,000% better, I don't know. What do you think? I bet you have a different opinion on this.
I think we both know John Richards and went through that startup ignition and the phrase brute force selling, like founders selling where they're so passionate. I think that's how we started Aspen. We didn't actually have something better or different or significant. We just had phenomenal salesperson that was able to go and make our offer seem next level. And we got to 1 or 2 million in revenue before we were able to actually say, who is our customer? What problems are we solving? Yeah. And what's a repeatable, scalable process that somebody that's not a lone wolf, that you can actually build a process and people can follow, which is a dangerous game to play, because for a second there with Aspen, I thought, man, do we actually just put a ton of work into something that's not actually going to be viable? Like we're at 1 or 2 million in revenue and not profit, like break even. What have I done? And then Carlos comes up and goes through that process with customer conversations and puts a playbook together. But I think you can brute force sell a service company for sure. It's different with a product company. But if you're the Wizard of Oz behind the screen and they are seeing the end result, but you actually have a manual team running it, then I still think you can brute force sell up to a significant amount of revenue.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that makes sense to me.
Which is okay. I don't think that's necessarily problematic as long as you can, because once you have a couple million in revenue, you can figure out the next step.
For sure. You eventually have to pivot into something that isn't sales based. You have to get to something that is value based ultimately.
Or you have to be able to scale the sales. You can be a sales organization, or you can be a product led organization that the product actually works. But there's we use no one listening to this, I don't know the owner of SAP, but that technology is horrible. SAP sucks so bad and so many companies use it. We work with Bank of America and we have to put their freaking invoices through an SAP portal, which is awful. It's horrendous. And so, there are companies that can be, Microsoft exists because they're phenomenal at sales, even though their software is super buggy and not great.
Yeah.
I'm very interested also in hearing more about going back to and I love that you differentiated those two things. For your company, you are a marketer, but the service, the software that you provide, and the product that you're providing is the data analytics and engineering for marketers, right? Let's talk about three types of companies: startup, a growing company, and a large organization. If looking through the marketer lenses, where would you put money at each stage, and when does it become the right time to invest in your product?
Yeah, we kind of started in that direction. So, and I didn't finish this thought, but if you have a brand new product that doesn't exist, you're in demand generation world, which means the only marketing options you have are, I have to go where my target market is and try to distract them from whatever they're doing wherever they are and get them to pay attention to me. And so digitally, you can do that if you're selling to businesses. Like, you can find businesses in trade organizations. Sometimes there's like, if you're building something that works with a CRM, there's HubSpot and Salesforce have like their app portals. And so you go like, hey, that's my marketing channel, is like a trade organization or an app portal. If I'm trying to target people with a net worth over $1 million for investing, like LinkedIn might be a place that you can find those people. So you have to go where they are, but it's hard marketing. It's super expensive marketing too, because their intent level is not, they're not where they're at to listen to you. You have to be really, really good at capturing their attention and proving that you're worth listening to. And the conversion rate on that, it's the same sort of thing as like direct mail. Like 99.9% of it's getting thrown away. You got to be able to do it in volume, and that usually costs quite a bit of money, and you can accept low conversion rates. And this is why so many of those brand new ideas have to raise, because that's the only marketing options they have, is that demand generation. The other option is where you're competing in an existing marketplace. And sometimes it's like, well, I don't know, first mover advantage, is that a thing or not? I'm of the opinion that it's not as big of a deal as people make it out to be, because somebody goes out and paves the way to pay for the audience share and brain share to be aware of a payment processing portal or something. And Braintree comes up behind PayPal, and now everybody knows what a payment processing portal is. And so you can still build $1 billion, it might not be PayPal, but you can still build a unicorn. And your path to success is like, as long as you can beat PayPal on some of its value props and make it better, your product a better use case for some of that market, then that hard trod demand generation work got done for you. Mm-hmm. So I think in the B2B space, when you're in beginning stage, the first most valuable thing you can do is put your website in front of Google search, and not SEO, because SEO takes so long to mature. You have to create a lot of content. You have to wait for that content to rank. And then hopefully it ranks on search terms that are actually search terms that your audience uses to describe the thing that you think you do. That's a long 6 or 12 months to find out whether you have the right targeting, is way too long. Yeah. So paid search is something that I don't have a website for a new product today. I can get a website in the next 24 hours, probably, to at least get a little bit of content. And I can get ads up in the next 6 or 7 hours after that. And I can be testing my messaging, my value props, against people who are actively searching for the things that I'm supposed to be solving. And I can see if that resonates. It's more expensive, but it's high intent. So if I'm testing my value props, if I'm testing to see if I have something that resonates with the market, then I want to test it against high intent. I don't want to test it against low intent, because then my success is maybe due to my targeting, maybe due to my messaging. I don't know. If I can test it and I know my targeting's right, I know I'm in front of people who are expressing my problem, the problem I am supposed to solve, then I'm really just testing my messaging. So search is the first place if you can afford it. Sometimes the competition is stiff there. If you're a D2C like e-commerce brand, if you're trying to sell like bike shorts or something, it's gnarly because there's so many of them out there already. And for you to be competitive or differentiate yourself there is really hard. While it's high intent, it's a hard place to start because it's so competitive already.
And when does it become, and you talked a little bit about that already, but at what stage and what questions and struggles they're having that they're at a point that they need your services and your software?
Yeah, I'll answer that question by saying it's usually after that. So a lot of times when you're very first just starting with like search-based marketing, especially paid search, then at that point, you're a lot of times still refining your value propositions. At that some point, or you have, and this is our services business now, our value propositions are refined, but we can't take on infinite amounts more business. And so we have a scale problem. We have to hire too many people, and it takes too long to train them to take on extraordinary amounts of business. We have product market fit, but we can't scale very well because it's human based. At that stage, when you hit that point where you have product market fit, but you can scale, either you have a really great people org, or you've got product, you can buy things in large bulk and sell a ton of it, or you can produce it in software and it costs you nothing. Once you hit that scenario, you have proven product market message fit. And then you can take that message to those lower intent places because you already know it's already validated and tested. If I show up to a conference of my peers and I say this message, that a bunch of them are going to go, yeah, like that thing's for me. So at that stage, that's when you can get into the demand generation where your messaging works for your target audience. And so you're not testing that at the same time as you're testing your value props.
What mistakes did you make this time around, and what are the most common mistakes that entrepreneurs are making that are going through this startup process, the validation process?
I don't know what mistakes we've made this time around. I think that even when you think you're not introducing bias, you still are. Like, it's so hard to not convince yourself that you're smart. Like, that's so hard to do because you try to listen, and the other side of your brain is like, you're trying to build solution. And it's easy to sell yourself when you come, that solution fits. So I think we haven't been as fast in development as we could have been because it's so hard to not convince yourself that you have a solution that everybody obviously would want. I mean, we've made way fewer errors than we did the first time, but those are still the errors.
I think what I've seen and what I've done is exactly what you said, and built the solution and tried to brute force sell the solution. The other question that I had for you is how do you deal with the thought of cannibalizing yourself? Because you have a service business, but now you're providing the product that you guys have internally and that you sell to your customers.
The hardest thing about that is if you don't evolve, somebody else is going to evolve around you. So you got to come to grips with that. You have to evolve. The other thing, and a way to say that too is $1 in revenue in a SaaS business might be worth $16 in valuation. $1 of revenue in a services business might be worth $1 in valuation. So it's easy to say, if I can do the same thing with something that scales better, it's 16 times more valuable. So financially, it's easy to go, yeah, I think I can make a case for that. What's hard is managing the people, because you've got people that are like, this is what I see as the value I bring to the world in my job. And you go, I think we're going to blow that up. And so that's hard. There's not an easy way to do it, but it's either going to be done from inside or it's going to be done from outside. You got to come to grips with that reality.
Are you doing that are you trying to sell to any customers that you're saying, when we tried to launch a SaaS product, we had a person say, well, I'm not going to introduce you to the person that you're asking for because your product that you created is going to replace me. Have you had any conversations like that, and how do you overcome it?
We've had those internally to our own team as our SaaS product starts to do things that our team is currently doing. And with our customers, we haven't had it that directly. I think that they see threats to their teammates, but they don't see threats to themselves. It could happen. It may happen to us. But I don't know. I don't know. We've never had one that's that direct, and I don't know how we would respond to it.
What's your most important metric what's the most important metric for a SaaS startup?
The most important outcome is traction. How you measure traction is different depending on the tooling and depending on the experience. So I don't know, for us, the way we operate right now is what our technology does is it looks at all of the different marketing data sources, and it looks for things that are changes in performance. And in fact, it's funny because analytics tools like Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics or Mixpanel, those tools have a technology embedded in them sometimes that's called anomaly detection. And from a math perspective, if you kind of can imagine like dots on a line, like counts of number of people who see your website every day. An anomaly is found when you look at the dots on that line and you look for something that's outside a norm. So you say it's usually between 90 and 100. So when we get 150, then that's weird. That's an anomaly. And there's algorithms to detect those sort of things. But in marketing, what we're most interested in is state changes. And that's a little different because we're thinking about like, if it's normally between a 90 and 100, we want to see things when it's 150. And then when the next day is 150 and the next day is 150, that's mounting evidence that we're in a different condition than we were in before. An anomaly detection system does the exact opposite of that. It says we're at 150, that's an anomaly. The next day of 150, well, that's less of an anomaly now. The next day at 150, well, that's less of an anomaly now because now it looks more like average. So our system is a state change system. We look at all the marketing data and we go, when does something change? Like we launch a new blog article or somebody started outranking us in search or one of our pages call to action button broke. And so the conversion rate between page 2 and page 3 is now dropped down. It's now different. So we look at all the different marketing systems and we find changes. Then we also connect to the change logs of those systems. So like when somebody presses the send button on a mass email, or when somebody changes the bids in a campaign, or when somebody adds new targeting or messaging ads to a campaign, or when somebody makes a change to the copy on the website. So we look at all of those change log systems so that we can detect when something changed, what was the likely cause of that change. So we use large language models to say, if this change happened, you went from 100 to 150, and it happened at this point in time, and here's the things that we've changed also at that point in time, then what's likely to have happened. So we can ask a chat GPT that question, and it answers those questions pretty well. So that's what we do. So that means that marketers can get past that. I don't see this stuff until 2 or 3 or 4 weeks later. I can see it when it happened, and I can see why it happened, and I can respond like I'm the smartest person in the room rather than the last one to know. So for us, what our daily metric is we communicate most of what we do through Slack messages right now, and we have a human in the loop that's kind of like following up with the teams that are using the software at an early stage. And our most important metric is the engagement with those messages. Because if people ignore those things, then it means they find no value. Mm-hmm. So our most important metric is engagement with those specific
That's most
things.
highly correlated with traction in your mind.
I think so. I mean, we get qualitative measurements after that, but like our biggest risk we think right now is like the alert fatigue. Like, you send me too many things and I stop, and like 3 or 4 of them out of 5 of them don't matter, then like I'm not paying attention anymore. That's kind of what we feel like our biggest risk is today.
So interesting. Carlos, I have 2 more questions, but you are free to ask any more if you want, and then we can wrap.
I did have a question earlier on. It's more related to the entrepreneurial side of starting a company. So going back to the time that you're working Dean, with Dean in the basement in that lab, how did that prepare you to start your own business?
I think if you've played sports, or if you've run, or if you've mountain biked or something like that, you've had this experience where you think you've tried it on your own in isolation a little bit, and then you watch somebody like you're mountain biking, you're like, I think I'm going fast, and then some well-practiced person comes by and passes you like you're standing still, and you go, oh, that wasn't like my perception of what fast is not what fast is anymore. Fast is now has a different definition in my mind. And if you follow that person, you go like, oh, like my expectation, the ceiling, the threshold for what I think is possible has now been removed. And I think that was the thing that was most important to me, is listening. I shared this story with you guys at lunch, but listening on a phone call to this guy go, do you know, to a customer call and go, can you build X, Y, or Z thing? And him like cover the phone and look at me and go, do you know what that is? And then me go like, I don't know what that is. And he's like, me neither. Gets back on the phone and goes, absolutely, we can build that. You're like, I thought that was irresponsible and unethical. And you're like, but that's actually some of the makings of doing things that don't exist. And so I think that watching that happen, like you get passed by a mountain biker and go like, oh, that's what fast is. Like, that's what entrepreneurial like mindset is. Okay, cool. I can do that. I just didn't know that anybody did that, but now I do. Like, I can do that.
I love that.
Well, two last questions on the entrepreneurial mindset. I don't think anyone gets to where you've gotten. You own a multi-million-dollar company. You're working with massively large organizations, providing analytics for them on the marketing side. What was one or two of those fetal position in the shower moments when you're like, what have I done?
Oh, we had a few of those. So the analytics services organization started as a failed software effort. And when we failed, we had a couple employees, and it was like, we knew that I had a founding partner at that time, and I was the only one that was looking at the finances, which was a problem for having a founding partner. And I was like, we don't have like any runway here. Like, we don't pay payroll in 30 days if we don't do something. And to generate revenue, like, the revenue we're generating is not sufficient. And the people that are working for us are mostly not getting paid anyway. And so I kind of had to do that. Like, I have to make $1 or I have to quit. Like, this needs to die or I need to make revenue now. And so one of the things that catapulted us as a services business was we went to like the things that we looked down on as like not the best places to get business, like the Fivers and the Upworks of the world. And we were like, we'll go work with our market for nothing, like call it $20 an hour or something, and see if we can solve market problems there and see if we can make enough revenue to extend that 30-day runway to 40 days. And then doing that was like you do that once and you go like, okay, maybe I can charge $40 an hour. Maybe I can charge $80 an hour. Maybe I can charge $150 an hour. Maybe I know enough about the market needs now that I can go get them outside of this platform. I've worked in enough of their specific circumstances that I can take that knowledge and go talk to them where they are and convince them that I can help them. And so that totally happened, where that pivot from failed software to services was like, we know we have something, and I had to get over my pride and go like, I'll get paid almost nothing to prove whether I know I have something and to refine my knowledge of that thing. So I remember that. I remember going to a wedding with my wife's family and thinking like, I can only pay attention to the wedding for like the 1 hour that they're actually like saying I do, and the rest of the time I have to be like answering emails. Otherwise I'm gonna have to like close the business down when we come back home. And so I had to give up some pride and make $1 at least to prove that there was an audience and there was a value there. Other fetal position moments, I think also that we talked about this a little at lunch too. I started with a 50-50 partnership in that services business. And after a few years of operating, we'd grown to a few $1 million in revenue, but we had a two-headed dragon. It was like my partner and I weren't doing the same things in the same way, rowing in the same directions. And part of it was communication, and part of it was we wanted different things and we didn't know. We weren't self-aware enough to know that we wanted different things. And so I had to make a decision. Either like it got to a point for me where I said like, either you buy me or I buy you, because I can't row in two different directions for any more time. Like, it's not healthy for my mental state to continue working on something that's not what my peers are working on And so that was a make or break moment too, where you realize like we probably shouldn't have, and neither one of us had the power to overrule the other person and say, this is the way we're going to do it. Like, get in line or get off the ship. It was like the ship's got to break in two or something, you know, somebody has to give, and there's no decision-making paradigm to force one of those things without like some catastrophe. So
you wouldn't recommend a 50-50 partnership?
I wouldn't. I like, at this point, I have profits interest holders. I like people who have, Mark Cuban says that like, if you want your employees to invest in anything, wouldn't you want them to invest in your business? Like, I love that mindset. I like thought partners, and I like my team to be invested and to receive the financial benefit of their progress. But I don't like business partners. So I like to, I like there to be one person that's in charge. And I don't have to be the person in charge, but I like there to be one.
Last question.
Yeah.
You're sitting across from in your 20s sometime, 25, 26, 27-year-old self. What's the one piece of advice you give them?
I think it's pay attention and enjoy the journey. I don't think at that point in time is when I was working at engineering firm with one of the greatest mentors of my life, and I don't know that I gave that as much intentional enjoyment as it deserved. I enjoyed it, but I could have, like, now not having that, I look back on that a lot of time longingly for that like relationship and that time again. It was so fun. We were working on hard problems and we were making success and gains and sometimes struggling through it, and I would love to experience some of those same feelings again. And so it would just be like, just soak it up. There's so much enjoyment in doing a hard thing in the journey, and like watching the progress of that, of battling against something where you're losing. You get a little light at the end of the tunnel and maybe a little bit of a win. That, like, it would be like, take a breath and enjoy it, because it's not going to be there forever.
Mike, thanks for being on. We appreciate having you.
Thank you guys. Really fun.
If people want to reach out to you or AdMind, how do they find you?
AdMindAnalytics.com is a way to hit up our consulting firm, and the best way to reach me about our product at this point, our beta group, is to hit me up through AdMind as well. Mike@admind.io.
Awesome.
Okay.
Mike, you also had mentioned that you're looking to connect with growth leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love, I'm continuously doing validation interviews, making sure that the things that we're thinking about are solving problems that actually exist and are worth solving. So if you're a marketer and you run a team of 5+ and you're in a Series B+ startup, or you're in an e-com company doing 50 million in revenue or more, I would love to just let you complain to me for 20 minutes and tell me what you're thinking about, what you wish was different in your world. That would be great.
And how do they get a hold of you?
Same way. Send me an email.
Awesome.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, guys.
You've been watching Hello Grow, the world's #1 growth podcast. I'm Cortland Brady.
I'm Carlos Souza. If you've watched this video so far, it means that you like the content that we're putting out and the people we're interviewing.
We're putting together a community of business leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales leaders. You liking, subscribing, and sharing this content helps us reach those that are going on that journey.
If you want to be a part of this community, please subscribe, smash that like button, and turn on those notifications.